great leaders understand that they have to guide these transformations, great leaders also understand that they can't rely on their entire workforce. They need to take the people who are on board from the beginning. So in this sense, if I'm a great leader and I want to inspire some change in my organization, I'm going to find the innovators. Now, how leaders must evolve together with business models. I wanted to take a few things here and show you the differences between different types of leaders. So we've got hierarchical control, matrix management, collaborative leadership, and our network of teams. Hierarchical control. Let's look at Henry Ford II. This is a guy who made all decisions alone, or tried to, required subordination from all employees, really tried to fire anybody who was an up-and-coming leader or clip their wings, he would call it, and just an overall kind of authoritarian out of the whole thing. So there's a good example of the hierarchical control that you would find in balance sheet-centric organizations. Jack Welch. A lot of people call Jack Welch a great leader. In fact, he was not a leader, he was a great manager. What he believed, change is good, don't fear it. One of the most interesting things that Jack Welch did, you probably all know the Pareto rule of 80% of the work is coming from the 80% of productivity is coming from, or value creation is coming from the top 20% of the workforce. What he did was say, okay, let's split that into 20% of the workforce, which is the most valuable, 70% of the workforce, which really don't bother anything, and 10% of the workforce that you should fire them and change that 10% every year. So here's a guy who did mass 10% of his company layoffs every year to keep fresh blood coming in. Definitely not a leader. Howard Schultz is an interesting leader. He's a coach, so this comes down to this collaborative leadership type business model. Communicates a lot of values, believes things about authority. A calm, low voice in the midst of a deafening noise is how you use authority. Frankness, only the truth is believable. Independence, anyone sweeping the floor has the right to choose a broom. So these types of things are about now distributing and co-creating and collaborating and working together and understanding and respecting people for who they are in the organization, and that they have a will and they have a personality and they have the ability to be an individual in the business. Now, let's look at Mark Zuckerberg, and I use Mark as an example. There are a lot of things that I don't necessarily like about Mark Zuckerberg, but Mark Zuckerberg plays the role very well, not because he chose it, but because he had no choice. Facebook developed so fast and grew so fast that there really wasn't much choice in how the organization was going to grow or be controlled, because it was uncontrollable. The growth was uncontrollable. So one of the things that I do really like about Mark is he says, I only hire people to positions that are directly under my jurisdiction that I myself would work for. That's an interesting rule. It's an interesting rule of somebody who would have the ability in a network of teams to be an inspirational guide, somebody that can inspire and guide and influence. So in that sense, if you want to hire the best people around you, people that you would be willing to work for, that's going to be an unbelievable team. And that's the way this type of leader thinks. So moving on, leading change. One of the things that's really interesting here, and this is something that if I go back to just over 20 years ago, I managed two business lines for PricewaterhouseCoopers. One of them was called large-scale program management, change management, which is basically kind of business model transformation. And the other one was called e-business advisory, which is pretty much digital transformation the way we know it today. So going back 20 years, I can say that there are a couple things that we understood then and we still understand today. And that is, if we do a digital transformation without transforming the business model, it's dangerous. The example that I gave earlier of Apple and the music industry, there was a clear example of the music industry as a whole not understanding the change that was coming before them with the digitization of music files. So that change was unfolding right before the very eyes of the entire music industry, and they didn't see it coming, and they weren't prepared for the business model change. Luckily, Apple saved them, which is great, but if Apple hadn't been there, the music industry probably would have suffered even more. And this is a concept of development cycles in business. All businesses go through this kind of learning phase, growth phase. Some people, the learning phase is also the investment phase. It's finding the optimal offer. The growth phase is when the offer sticks. The optimization phase is when you start squeezing the last bits of juice out of the orange, so to speak, and then you get into a decline. And Clay Christensen talked about this 25 years ago, I think, in The Innovator's Dilemma, when he talks about this dilemma zone between a late stage business and an early stage business, and how they often live in conflict because the ability to measure is very different, the ability to prove that things will work is very different, and the mindset is generally different. And this is what almost killed Apple with the battle between Apple II and Macintosh. And what we saw here was that this dilemma zone is so strong that they actually fired the founder, one of the founders. They fired Steve Jobs and almost drove Apple into the ground with this Apple II offering. And when they finally brought Steve Jobs back, he said, okay, we kill Apple II tomorrow. Macintosh is our future, closed system, we're giving people a great product, not choices that they can manage on their own. So this is a very interesting space, this dilemma zone. And one of the things that we know is that there are three concrete models of how to try to guide change or manage transformation. I always say there are two things in business that are almost impossible to manage. One of them is corporate culture, and the other one is transformation. So you can guide, you can influence, you can inspire, and so on. You can create an environment for these things to happen, but those two things, corporate culture and transformation, are almost impossible to manage, because the more you try to manage them, the less manageable they become. Things great leaders understand. We've got a few minutes left, and I just want to touch on a couple things here. Great leaders understand that people accept innovation and new ideas in different ways. You may not have seen this graph before, but I'm sure you've heard the concept of innovators, early adopters, early majority, late majority, and so on. So the idea is that there's about 2.5% of the population that are the people thinking up the new ideas, and they just get all excited anytime there's a new idea. Then there's the early adopters. These are people who, without much proof of success, are willing to follow new ideas because they're easily inspired by the innovators. Then you have an early majority. These are people that are willing to get on board as soon as they see some initial results, some initial uptick, and so on. Then you've got your late majority and your laggards. So you've got 50% of the population who are just difficult to convince. They've got all the arguments of why it's not going to work and so on. So great leaders understand that they have to guide these transformations. Great leaders also understand that they can't rely on their entire workforce. They need to take the people who are on board from the beginning. So in this sense, if I'm a great leader and I want to inspire some change in my organization, I'm going to find the innovators to help me detail my pilot ideas. I'm going to find the early adopters to help me manage my pilot projects and show that the early success that's needed. That early success will help me to convince the early majority, and that early majority, those are the people who will roll out the change in the organization. I will pay absolutely no attention to the late majority or the laggards unless they're stopping my movement. So great leaders understand that they need to lead change with inspiration and guidance, not with management. That's one. Great leaders also understand that we're no longer motivated by money for simple tasks, but that we're motivated by things like autonomy, mastery, and purpose. These are things that Dan Pink wrote about in the book Drive, where he says that as soon as you get engagement in areas of strategic thinking, cognitive engagement, problem solving, creativity, and so on, all of those things of money for manual tasks doesn't work anymore. And people need to feel that they are in control of their own environment, they're getting better with each round of what they do, so they're growing as a professional, and that what they're doing is going to make a difference. This sounds very close to some of the things that we talked about for gamers. Gamers in a game are in their own environment, they're getting better with each round of the game, and they've got these epic tasks that they're after, solving the world's problems, winning the war, and so on. So this is very interesting, and great leaders understand that, and they use it for inspiration. Great leaders also understand that creating the right environment is the key to success. If we build an environment for trust and cooperation, biologically, our brains will respond because it's what's been programmed into us for the last 50 or 100,000 years, depending on what theory you believe. Great leaders also understand that moving from one tribe to another. If I've identified stage 1 and stage 2, stage 3 tribes in my organization, I also understand that they can't see very far past the next level up or down. So what I understand is that I need to speak the language of all of these different tribes and be able to influence tribes to move up. If it's a stage 1, I will probably move them out or up very quickly, but the whole idea as a great leader is to try and move people up. And one of the kind of really cool things that I mapped this about a year and a half ago, I think, and I thought great leaders really have to have this balance between tactics of government and tactics of religion, and they have to know when to use them at the right times. So in times of crisis, I don't need to be very inspirational. I need to take the wheel and drive the car for a while. But in times that are good, I need to be inspiring and guide people and allow them to have their autonomy and get better and have purpose and do great things and have an epic mission. Why not have an epic mission? Yeah? So this balance between governing and being an inspirational guide, like you would find in religion, is quite powerful. So it's quite powerful, and one of the things that you'll notice is governing is on the left 2 of these, and collaborative leadership is on the right 2. So it's a very dramatic skill set to be able to move back and forth between these different models and understand when to use the different pieces that you have in your arsenal. So the leadership imperatives are as follows. We want to move from participating to guiding, and to do that, it starts very simply. We've got communication, collaboration, building communities, working as a leader to influence and engage people, and just generally being a good role model for everybody out there. So that is the end of my presentation. I wanted to say I'm always happy to receive emails or WhatsApp from anybody, and if you're able to scan the QR code here, that'll take you to all of our social media, as well as my social media personally. Please, we've got a lot of content on YouTube and Facebook and so on. Feel free to subscribe to YouTube. We have new videos coming out 2-3 times a week on different topics.